It gives me great pleasure to introduce our friend Ethan Bronner, who will lead the conversation with Nir Baram, who now you're all familiar with if you weren't before. Director of the film, also wrote the book that the film is, of course, based on, and all of that research. And how many people here have read the book? Just interested. Okay. Okay, so you all knew what you were getting into. I got it. And Gili Getz is here representing J Street. And I think that we wanted to really bring in another perspective that we thought would add another level to the conversation. Ethan, I'm handing things over to you.
Thank you very much, Isaac. Okay, so it is an unusual conversation that the J Street guy is representing the right wing, okay? So it was a great movie. I thought it was really powerful. I spent 12 years as a reporter in Israel, the 80s, the 90s, and in the 2000s, and this was my life. I can't tell you how many conversations I had like that with Hamas, with Fatah, with the settlers. That was over and over and over again, the endless conversation, which is why pessimism was my steady companion, which is apparently what it's become for you. In each case, you have the sense that each side, there's no sort of movement. They are sort of waiting for the other side to get how wrong they are, right? That's the feeling you get when you have these conversations. I wanted to start with you, Nir, on one quick thing, which is that you have different titles in Hebrew and in English, right? In Hebrew, the title is Ha'aretz she'me'ever laharim, the land on the other side of the mountains. And in English, you chose the title Land Without Borders. Do you want to tell us why?
Only because...
You got to push a little button.
Only because my publisher said they would think about the mountains in Montana when they will read the book. So we wanted to focus them on the...
Right. In other words, for Israelis, it's this land on the other side of the mountains, and for the rest of the world, it's land without borders. Okay. So your father, Uzi, says in the film that you are essentially buying into the right? That the right is saying, well, these people really don't want to make a deal. They want it all back. There's no hope. And so are you, in fact, helping the right in what you're saying?
Well, I was trying to convey more a subtle idea of the conflict. And I think that basically we were talking for a long time, especially my father and the UN community, and only negotiation, basically, not a discussion between human beings on both sides about the 67 problem and the 67 parameters. And I think that by doing it, we ignore something substantial about the conflict. If you will take a Palestinian child and ask her to draw Palestine, she will draw a map with all of the Palestine. If you took an Israeli boy, he will draw the same map exactly. This is an essential problem. And it started, I would say, even before the Balfour Declaration. And what I was trying to convey in the movie, that the Palestinian catastrophe is something that we have to understand. We have empathy towards it. We have to understand it. We have to respect it. We have to try to negotiate with it. I feel it's, by the way, it's a much easier problem to solve than the 67 problem.
Tell us quickly why.
Because I think that basically what Israel did every day since 67, Israel erased the green line, right? Every day since 67. We decided there is no green line anymore, and there is essentially no green line anymore. Okay. And by putting there the blockades, the settlements, we make it impossible to do a clear and cut two-state solution, right? Okay. Nobody talks about it anymore.
Yes.
The price we'll have to pay for doing it also is concession in 48 from a pragmatic point of view. And I think that...
so what does that mean?
It means that some of the refugees will come back. There were discussions about it. And there will have to be ramifications for the Nakba, recognition. You know that I met a lot of Palestinians that told me, first of all, let's recognize. Let's talk about it. Let's start an open discussion about 48. So the problem with my father is that he spent 50 years in politics, writing about Palestine, never spent 1 second to think about the Nakba and the refugees. And this is, I think, a problem that in this situation, in the conflict, is something we cannot ignore. This is what I felt, you can say that it's my perspective.
Okay, so Gili, Nir is saying that the problem of the generation that tried to do Oslo is that it failed to acknowledge the Nakba. First of all, I'm not convinced that that's true. I agree that it wasn't a major part of their
I
negotiations.
didn't just say this. I said they made the settlements, etc., etc. I didn't say the whole thing collapsed because of the Nakba.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So do you think that, in fact, discussing the Nakba is going to make a difference in this thing, that it hasn't happened until now?
I absolutely do. And I think that the reason this film is so important is it introduces the audience and Israelis who watch it and Palestinians who watch it to the maximalist position of Israelis and Palestinians who live in the West Bank. And what I love about the film and what I love about this festival, what we're so excited about being a partner in this wonderful family of partners, the organizations that are part of this festival, is that look at Israeli society directly, its complexities and the life of its minorities. And it goes to the people themselves, not the abstract, not some sort of idea of the conflict, but the people who live it, the actual people who day to day are affected by the conflict. And making peace is hard. And making peace requires giving up on these maximalist identities that essentially reject the other.
Well, but I mean, Nir is saying that making peace requires starting and understanding the maximalist problem.
Absolutely. That's why this film is so important. And I think it's important for both Israelis and Palestinians and for us here to understand what are the other side is giving up.
Okay.
What part of their identity they're giving up to make peace. And today in Israel, a few hours ago, there was a memorial for somebody who gave his life for peace. Somebody who, against all odds, started a process. And I found it interesting that none of the settlers you spoke to, after 20 years, have a vision of what it is, the reality they want to build.
Well, but I mean, in the film, neither did the Palestinians. In particular, the Hamas
Absolutely.
guy in particular, right? He sounded like a complete lunatic. I mean, you use the term, that's more or less that term to the Israeli settler, but the Hamas guy made no sense, right? You thought he made sense?
I thought that from Palestine, I don't want to speak as a Palestinian. I talk as an Israeli. From Palestinian perspective, many things he said made sense.
Well, I mean, what does that mean from the Palestinian perspective? We're here to talk about what makes sense. If you start putting what the perspective, we'll never get anywhere.
I will tell you what makes sense. That from the perspective of himself, okay?
Yes.
They were there for a long time, for hundreds of years, because of Zionism. He was expelled for Zionism, UN resolution, etc. He was expelled from his home, from his land. He doesn't believe that right now there can be a joint a living together with Palestinian Jews. So his idea, for my opinion, his idea is crazy. But
okay, you said it.
No, but understanding the perspective that you talk with Palestinians and you talk to them only about the occupation, ignoring the fact that for Palestinians this is a dispossession process for more, let's say something like 100 years. It's something that I felt it became illogical when I was there more and more. And the Israelis and part of the international community in discussion invented the conflict that started in '67. I'm not saying they ignored 48, but I was in hundreds of peace meetings with Palestinian Jews. Always the discussion was, okay, two states, 67. When someone of the Palestinian talk about the Nakba, they were just waiting him to, okay, let's stop talking about, let's be serious. And I said, what I felt, that this is serious.
Okay. I don't deny that it's serious. You're absolutely right that it's extremely important. The thing is that after 70 years of the state's existence, there is something a little delusional about this idea that everyone is going to leave on either side, okay? Yeah. Okay. Now, at the same time, it seems to me fairly bizarre that that he has this notion that everyone's going to leave. And by the way, I have stood with settlers. I point to Nablus. I say there are 1 million people there. They'll leave. They'll leave. Right? You hear it all the time on both sides.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Do you complain about the people I wanted to interview? Because I went to the West Bank in the book and in the articles in Haaretz. And I talked to hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give an opinion of one person of the Hamas. By the way, all the rest of the Palestinian, especially Manal Tamimi and Ismail, they believe in peace. And most of the people that watch the film, they talk about the Palestinians. They don't talk about the settlers in the film. I asked them honestly. I didn't go like Amos Oz with them and told them, you are Messianic. I told them, okay, you are here. Give me a solution of equal rights.
Right.
And you saw what's going on.
Useless.
But people that see the movie, for them, that the settlers are very radical. It's like obvious. But the Palestinian, they cannot really talk about their rights. They cannot talk about the Nakba. They cannot talk about home. And I think that basically...
When you say these people, you mean these are Israelis and
not
Jews
just
you're
Israelis,
talking
people
about?
that watch the movie in different places in the world.
Interesting.
They're ignoring the settlers.
Really?
And it's like the big thing of the movie that the Palestinians talk about the Nakba and want some justice for the Nakba. But the fact is the settlers are not just crazy people out there. They are controlling the Israeli government. So the representative of the Israeli government tells you in the film, we want them to go to, I want to buy Balata. By the way, he said 30 dunams.
I know.
The 30 dunams that he has in Balata. All Balata is one
basically
dunam.
all of Balata, I know.
And everyone, so I think that we need to think about it in like a more open mind. Look, this is something that happened to me. It's an experience that I had in the West Bank. I felt that all of the people that I know that thought about the peace process, even if they talk about 48, they never fully try to understand the Palestinian perspective about 48.
Okay.
And the movie tried to understand
I
it.
think that's a very fair thing to say. The only question I have is is that all it will take? Because the feeling you get when you talk to people on both sides is that actually understanding is not going to get you very far. All right, that was part of the goal of the 90s, all that understanding and all your father and those guys who sat with other Palestinians. There was a lot of understanding and there's a lot of friendship, right? In the end, it didn't produce a solution. And one of the reasons is
I think it's because of the United States of America, by the way.
Okay. We'll get to that in a minute. It's possible. No. I understand. They played a role.
But you know what I think this is I can argue what you said from every level. The 90s, we gave the international community and the U.S. and the two sides lead to a process, right? The process failed because of many reasons, right?
Sure.
So, and my father represents the process.
Okay.
One of the problems of the process, I think, in my mind, it overlooked a lot of aspects in both sides, like I said in the beginning. Also, it overlooked the simple fact that many settlers that came there didn't come from ideological reasons, they came for economical reasons.
Of course.
And they say, why would you want to take me from Efrat? Give them your house in the kibbutz.
I guess what I'm asking is, do you really believe that the failure to acknowledge those things is the reason that the process failed?
I think that the process failed for multiple reasons,
Yes.
but also the process failed because the objection from both sides to the process was much bigger and stronger than we understood.
That's right.
Also, there wasn't an international side that could enforce the idea.
Right. Nobody pushed them.
And for 30 years, we are waiting for the U.S. to come and make peace, right?
Yeah.
So I think that I will tell you what ended after the 90s. After the 90s, what I understood, nobody will come to make peace. Not Trump, not Gerald Kushner, not Obama. They will not come, right? So you failed us by didn't bring the peace, what all of my friends believe in. My father told me when I was 6. He told me always, the international community will come and make peace. Now we are alone. It's us and them. And I don't believe that we can make like tomorrow a deal. I believe in peace process, a reconciliation process.
And that's why you want to start with
and the reconciliation process must start with 48.
That's fine.
And by the way, I will say one last thing about the initiative.
Okay.
A week ago, Meron Rapoport, from the initiative that I show, One Homeland, Two States, went with Arni El-Mashni to Man TV, and both of them presented in Arabic their solution to the peace process. For me, it's more important than 10,000 initiative of Yossi Beilin and all the peace process, peace industry right now. This is how you make the reconciliation process. So this is why I showed them in the movie. We are in a different phase now. We need to think about the whole solution in a different way.
Do you agree with that, Gili? It's time to think of a new way?
It always time to think, and I think reconciliation is one component of reaching peace. The other component is a political component, and despite the fact of 20 years, despite the fact that I think the Netanyahu government has been very good at killing hope and making sure that we feel that there is no solution. That solution is, I mean, it's part of the process. Despite the fact of home demolitions, despite the fact of settler expansions, despite the fact that Israeli democracy itself is now eroding, despite all that fact, nobody can come on with a mechanism. Nobody can have a vision where we end the occupation, where we keep Israel secure and democratic, other than this two-state solution that was elaborately debated and is now in a fight.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
about
please.
it? We were talking about the two-state solution in the 80s when there were, 10,000 settlers. Now there is 500,000 settlers. Is there a date that this discussion will expire when there will be 700,000 settlers? Because we can talk about it in 2,900 when there will be 5 million settlers.
I think right now, with the plans of annexation of Area C or the creeping annexation of Area C, we see exactly what that point is. That's exactly the point we're fighting. The demolitions in South Hebron Hills, the demolitions in East Jerusalem, the expansion of settlements, including the decision to annex Ma'ale Adumim, all these are the critical point. E1, the reason E1 is brought in the movie, because E1 is ground zero for the viability of the two-state solution. There's a reason why even Bibi Netanyahu, even the most right-wing government in Israel's history, is not touching E1. Because they know that we all know that that's ground zero on the viability of two-state solution. And I believe that if there's a will, I believe that if Israelis and Palestinians hear a different message, a message that a two-state solution, a process to end the occupation is possible, I believe many of them will take it, not abandoning their maximalist narratives. And when I go to Israel, I make a point of going and spending time with Israelis and Palestinians, especially from the West Bank, Palestinians from the West Bank, who spend time together and work together to end the occupation. And what you see in those spaces, that they don't do that. They do not deny fundamentally the Jewish narrative, Israeli Jewish narrative, or the Palestinian narrative. They allow space for both of them, because that's how you do peace. Okay. That's how you work for peace.
We're going to take questions from the audience. Okay, Isaac, are you going to hand around
Folks, yes, I'm going to hand around a microphone and a reminder.
First, you're going to make a warning.
Keep the speeches short. Try to make those speeches in the form of a question, and always with respect and the ability to listen. You'll ask a question. Wait for the answer. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say that the other day I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about the Balfour Declaration, how that was wrong. And I was like, are you kidding me? So it is, like you say, you should go to 48. Well, I was hearing a Muslim talking about the Balfour Declaration. So I don't.
What's the point about Balfour Declaration?
Well, that they had no right to do that, and that started the whole thing. So
I can tell you something maybe from Palestinian perspective about Balfour Declaration. A lot from an empire that didn't control Israel when he gave the declaration, promised the land to people, the 10% of them was in Israel right now, and they asked themselves, what about us? This is their perspective. By the way, anyone who expect any Palestinian to have respect to the Balfour Declaration will never ever solve the conflict. Never. You have to respect the fact that for the Palestinian, all this process is a tragedy. And then you can make peace.
Okay, another question.
Question right here.
One question that I had was about the nature of the IDF specifically, and how the IDF has become the dominant socializing institution in Israeli society, and the most important task of the IDF is administering occupation. And so experiencing occupation for Israelis is from behind the barrel of a gun, especially as they live further and further apart from Palestinians. So at what point does Israeli society become so far removed from the consequences of administering occupation that a political solution that it could work out with the Palestinians is far gone?
Well,
Question.
do you both agree with the premises of the question that the IDF is becoming more and more the socializing force in Israel, and that the central task of the IDF is occupation? You think those things are true?
I think less and less, maybe.
I would think so. I think it's less and less.
Used to be really, this is the biggest achievement of the IDF. It used to be like a place that everyone goes and mixes together. I think that now you see a different kind of people that serve in different units. You have like the elite of the IDF, which is, so in the regular units there is less, I think, mixture. So it's nothing new. But this is why the IDF beloved in Israel, because of this process. Secondly,
The second idea is that the central task of the IDF is to maintain the occupation.
yeah, of course. That's what I think. The IDF built a bureaucratic mechanism of keeping the occupation that some parts is ingenious. I saw it controlling the. That now if a Palestinian write a post, and in the post hit two things. He fought with his wife and he's desperate. 5 minutes later, the IDF will come there because maybe it will create a terror attack. So this is a problem. But I just want to say one thing honestly. We all say that the situation is unsustainable. But basically, the biggest achievement of Netanyahu as prime minister, that up until now he showed to the Israelis that there is no real price for occupation. Israel is thriving economically. He's going to Africa and get respect like a hero. And India. And we said always, that the occupation will kill Israel, will destroy Israel. I still believe morally it's totally true, it corrupted Israel. But Netanyahu has a real achievement to show to the Israelis when it comes to the everyday life. What he doesn't have is zero solution of what to do 10, 20, or 30 years from now. Because if you take the Zionist point of view, because I'm a guy that believes in equal rights between Palestinian and Israelis. You can do it in two states, in the Confederacy, whatever you want. I'm not don't have a fetish to a specific solution. But the route we are going right now, and the way that a lot of people that think they are helping Israel by helping Netanyahu, they are leading only to one situation, to one state or an apartheid state. This is the only solution that will be after the green line will be totally erased. I think we are already there. And I think that people don't understand that tactically Netanyahu won, but the conversation in Palestine also, I saw it all the time with young people, is the one state. Not because they want to destroy Israel, because they saw the PA for 20 years. They are not impressed. I didn't hear one good word about the PA in the whole journey. And they say, okay, you want the land? Good for you, we can do one state for everyone. So I think that people that want a different solution and helping Netanyahu to quiet the criticism are doing a historical mistake from their perspective.
Okay,
And I think there's a big price. You say in the movie that Israelis don't feel the price of the occupation. I think what's happening now with Israeli democracy itself, with the society itself, coming at the seams is a price for the occupation. I mean, the notion that you can occupy another people without fundamentally changing your character is, I think, coming home to roost. It's a slow process, but it's definitely something Israeli society had to
It's less something you feel every day.
Right, and talking to Israelis about the occupation is a conversation of people living next to a place they know very little about. I found that what's important about your movie that it deals both with 67, which is really important to understand what the occupation is, what life is there for people who experience it, but also about 48, what the creation of Israel was like from the Palestinian perspective. And these conversations are going to happen hopefully more and more, where people can look it in the eye, and as opposed to conveniently, even in Israeli politics, conveniently not talking about it at all because they don't have to.
By the way, when the movie came out first in TV, we got since then maybe thousands of letters and messages by Israelis that saw it, and they made them think about it. You know what? I don't really expect much more. It made them certain sensitivity. Some of them remember how was their life in 48. And I think it's not like giving a solution. It's giving like a ground of thinking maybe about different aspects of the conflict. This is the idea of
So you are more moral than Sarah Etzny. Another question, please.
I'm just going to announce that for those of you going to the Promise Band, that's going to be starting in about 2 minutes. So this is your exit signal. Everyone else, please stay seated and enjoy the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, my question is to Nir, why, if we talk about 48, why we're not talking about Jews before 48? To let them understand what happened to Jews that came from Arab countries. And the notion of using the term occupation, I don't know if it's very accurate. So you gotta think about it. I know that occupation was something that Arafat kept on harping in the media, and now half of the Israeli are using the word occupation. But I don't think occupation is very accurate over here.
Okay, but their first point is
the Arab.
to start before 48, right?
Yeah.
That's what he's asking.
My grandmother came from Khaleb, and my grandmother came from Aden.
Right.
And this is, there is no real, first of all, there is no real connection between the two sides. If you have if we have problem with Iraq or Yemen or Syria, we can sue Syria right now for their home. I'm sure that we'll gain something. This is not a Palestinian problem. This is a different problem. Not all the Arabs are the same. Okay, so we can sue Iraq. By the way, I think that my house her house in Khaleb is basically, maybe it's ours. And someday I will try to find it. It's not really necessary to compare it now. Only for ground to not solve anything. Secondly, using the term occupation, I never asked this question in Israel. It's only in New York you can ask such a question.
Okay, but let me just stay with your grandparents and parents for 1 minute, because the one issue that is, in a way, you looked at this conflict in a bubble, right? It's by itself. The truth is there are 60 million refugees in the world today, right? People, all of us come from, parents and grandparents came from other places, lost property. Why is it that this needs to be restored in such a specific way in this conflict and not in others?
First of all, this is a valid and rational point, and you can maybe think it's like it's a good argument, but you saw in the movie, and I think you saw it from your encounters, this is a different sensitivity. Also because I felt that the Palestinian desire for a Palestinian state is not as important as the desire to home, to the land. It's something that we that always think about the national conflict, we don't get it. My father don't get it. He doesn't understand what does it mean to be taken from home, that the Palestinian family was totally torn apart, that all their brothers went to Saudi Arabia, to Chile. He doesn't understand it. We have to understand it. We don't have to agree to love it. We have to understand it. Second, so I just think that you can say it, but how it will advance us forward to explain it to them, understand? Mm-hmm. I think that we should try to solve it. Secondly, I think that in some cases there were a process of amending it in some way, okay? Recognition, conversation, ramifications, something. Here, there was nothing.
Right,
and
but you're right. I mean,
you know what I would do if I would be the prime minister tomorrow? Without peace process, with nothing. I would come to the Palestinian refugees and I would say, I will want to try to make it better. And by the way, I told this story, not necessarily come back. Of course, not everyone can come back. But I want to let's try to talk about this. You know that I asked Manal Tamimi, what do you want? She said, he can get an apartment in Tel Aviv.
Right.
This is not, there is no apartment in Tel Aviv right now. So this is like not, but I wanted to tell you something about that. Ehud Olmert, I told this story. It was Israeli prime minister. He sat in jail. So one day I'm taking my son to hang in the street, and I get a call in 7 a.m. And Olmert called me from jail after he read the book.
He didn't have a lot to do, apparently.
Apparently not. Apparently he had more than one conversation. So he's talking to me about the book, and he really loved the book. So it's very important. But he said, look, I talked to Abu Mazen about the Nakba and the refugees, and me and Condi and George. We settled the whole thing.
Well, they had numbers.
I told Abu Mazen, I quote it now, the amount of refugees that will come back is as the amount that can come into the Muqata. I think it's 5,000. And I told him, okay, so why wasn't a deal being made? So he told me, look, I'm here now. Which means present, okay?
In prison.
So,
Where's Isaac with the mic? Okay, you're now Isaac. Okay, find another questioner, please. Yeah, that's a good question.
I wasn't thinking about a question. I was thinking about a solution. All of us here have been living in different places. I was born in Brooklyn. I was in Bronx, all over. We don't have the same business about the land that you're talking about. But suppose there were billions of dollars that was available to rebuild a particular place that would be Palestinians, where Palestinians would live, where they would decide what it would look like, who they would make where the mosque is. They would determine the roof, the streets. It would be their construction. If we had money, they don't have the money, but if we had money, other places to give you, is that a possibility?
look, I don't want to talk about in their name, but I can tell you a lot of Palestinians I met in Chile and in Kosovo and in many other places. He asked me like a question. He say, I had a house, I had a field, I didn't participate in the war. I was just there. Do you owe me something? I don't know. Maybe it's not the value of the house right now because of you, Israel, and the Western society, you made the house, but you owe me something. You want to talk about it? And I think that this is also a conversation that we can have. The question is 48 is not as scary as it sounds. Ahmad Tibi told me, Israeli MK, that in polls, I don't know, 25 or 20% of the refugees wanted really to come back, maybe less. The problem is that when we don't recognize it and we don't talk about it, it only becomes much worse. This is a conversation that I think by not open it in negotiations, because almost always say, Abu Mazen told me secretly, I don't want all these secrets anymore. I want to talk about it. Let's open the subject after 70 years and try to find some common ground, and I think we can find.
Over there, please.
Hi, you'll be next. Thank you so much for the wonderful film. I want to also your question. There is something that is totally misunderstanding here. You all weird why they want the right of return, and you forget that there is a law of return. How a group of Jews here can ask why Palestinians want to come back for his own home when the entire concept of Zionism is why Jews from all over want to go by law of return, not right of return. And it's very important to see that this ethnic cleansing is not something that was 48. Today, even today, we have to go, 48 was the first thing, we were weak. After 51, we got rid of Palestinians that live in Ashkelon to Gaza. Then my father stole 2 million dunam from Palestinians in the Galilee and gave it to Jews. Then his father, we are...
My father didn't steal land. It's only
we did it as a government. My father did it as an employee of your father. And you have to understand, and then in 67, really 67 was the option of the tikkun, but in 67, because there was a repetition of 48, it's make 48 and 67, and today when they destroyed the Bedouin village and put Jews instead of the Arabs on the same land, it's make it as one continuity of ethnic cleansing. Now people like Nir and me, Israeli Jew, we don't want to see the Arabs, the Palestinians go away. We want to live with the people of the land. This is our wish. This is our dream. It's not our horror. So there is a mistake here.
Okay.
And
okay.
And the last thing for the American people, if you want to let the Palestinians speak, you really have to speak against your governor, Cuomo, that doesn't allow them to do a non-violence resistant as BDS. So this is a very important. If you believe in democracy, let the Palestinians create a non-violence dialogue with us through boycotting people who didn't treat them equally. Thank you.
By the way, Udi Aloni has a good film, Junction 48. Did
Yes.
you see it?
Sure. He's also part of the mafia that ran this country for a long time. His mom, Shulamit Aloni.
Yes, his mother, Shulamit Aloni, was very important.
But I mean, he's a real person in his own. He's not just the son of Shulamit Aloni. He's a very
He's a real
serious.
person.
Yeah, he's a real guy. Yeah, yeah. Okay, but it wasn't a question, but it was an interesting statement. And unless you want to respond,
Can I just reject the idea that to support an end to the conflict, to support an end to the occupation, you need to support, the only way to do it is support the boycott.
No, just don't let them do it. Don't support it. Just allow them legally.
The other thing, I think that Jewish Americans have a big role to play in, as they always did, in what's happening in Israel and for advocating for what we believe the best solution is a two-state solution. There's a big role and a very important role, I think a crucial role, for Jewish Americans to play, to make their voice heard both here in Washington, that has a lot to do with what's happening in Israel-Palestine, even though it sometimes seems like Washington just comes to visit, tries to fix it, and leaves. Washington is very much play-by-play interacting with what's happening in Israel, has a lot of the village of Susio's exact example of pressure from lawmakers around the world, definitely Washington, to prevent the village from being destroyed, and from protecting the two-state solution. So I think the role is crucial, it's important, and we should definitely play it.
I think we have to say that we thought that Washington had a role, I think you will agree, right, in the 80s and the 90s. It has no role in the last 8 years.
It turned out the idea that it could impose its view turned out to be mistaken, and it wasn't important
and also,
enough.
I think
it wasn't important enough in the United States.
Yeah, and by the
way, there was an agreement about
also,
it.
I think the Palestinian has suspicions toward the way that the U.S. is mitigating the conflict, and justifiably so.
Of course.
But also, I think that this is, by the way, a grand vacuum that we have in the conflict. This is why we don't have peace process. But I just say that as an Israeli who live in Israel, as a son of Israel, I can't wait to the United States to come anymore, like they promised us. But I think it's very important what you do. But we need to start a reconciliation, a grassroots one, and this is like the point of the movie.
I find it. Are you going to hand out a mic, or are we? Okay. The one thing I would say about what he said is the idea that it should be against the law, BDS, is a little offensive, even whatever you think of BDS.
These are just two very brief questions. When Israel was created, it was supposed to be a Jewish state and the Arab state. So which countries represent that Arab state? And was Bill Clinton's solution in 2000 for the two-state solution, would that ever be used as a roadmap to create a two-state solution? Because at that time, everyone thought it was.
Well,
You should answer.
I mean, that's what Nir's movie was about, to say that was the idea and it has failed, and so we need to look for something else. That was the point of his movie. That doesn't mean he's right, by the way.
Yeah, but just let's be honest. Since the solution and the movie, I think there were 150 more settlers in the West Bank.
Right. I mean, part of the problem is that time doesn't stand still in terms of the increasing population in the West Bank of Jews, and the idea that an Israeli government is going to remove tens or hundreds of thousands of Jews from their homes is probably folly.
And then you ask what will we do now? Because
Which countries today represent the Arab part of the 1948? They would create a Jewish state, which is Israel, and an Arab state. And we know an Arab state was never. But which countries represent that Arab state?
The Palestinian Authority.
I mean, the state you're talking about is the West Bank and Gaza, or some portion of whatever the November 47 map
But
was.
by the way, I think you said something very important that maybe people don't.
unusual.
It is unusual, but something that you said that the interest of the U.S. to solve the conflict is not as big as it was. We have to say something about it. There was a notion in the 80s and 90s and 60s.
This was central.
If you will solve,
Right.
just say it.
Yeah, no. This is a very important point, which is that there was a notion at the time, which, by the way, was probably not true even then, but that the whole sort of Middle East stability went through Jerusalem, right? And now, of course, we see in post-2011, the beginning of the Arab uprisings, that there is enormous difficulty. It has nothing to do with Israel-Palestinian
It became
problem.
like a local problem. That's our problem.
Exactly.
This is why.
It's still in Israeli politics, the idea of a regional deal, right? The idea that the Palestinians will be part of a larger arrangement is alive and well and actually gaining steam.
We're not going to say transfer. We're just going to tell them to pack their bags. That was very interesting. I like that.
I met someone that told me, a peace process guy, that told me, look, Obama, this was bullshit because he was scared from the Democratic. Trump and Gerald Kushner will make peace. And I said, if we were in this point, this is what you believe in as a liberal, to make peace.
You're in trouble.
We should start the whole thing from now.
We're going to take
You want to?
one last question.
Okay, one last question. Okay. Oh, but they got a whole section here, and I even know these people. You'll have to have one more question. Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for a wonderful movie, first of all. I enjoyed it very much. I think you are talking about understanding the truth, the real truth, and I think that you miss some of the aspect of it. The common Israeli doesn't care about moral. You say, if I'm going to educate him about, if I will say the apartheid word, it will make any change, or talk about human rights or such. There's a few leftists that this is important for them, but most of the Israelis, some of them, my best friends, doesn't care about human rights for the Palestinians. They cared about security, they cared about economics, they care about, their ability to live in their own land. They don't care about morals. And
do you have a question on that, or you just want to say that?
I'm going to say it.
Huh?
And
I think
just one sec.
That was a joke in the
And,
movie. I said it in the movie.
Okay, so I
The
didn't.
70s joke was about.
Right.
Okay,
It's a
so
return
so it's I think it's it's a war about land, and they said it. Both of the sides said it. It's a war about land, and no side want to give up the land, and nobody, definitely not in front of the cameras, will say, "I'm going to give up my land." And the only reason, unfortunately, because all my beliefs is pretty much like what you present in the movie, like your own thoughts, is, and this is history also showed, that it's only by uprising, like the Intifada. The Intifada was the only reason when Israeli was willing to give up their land.
Yeah. Well,
Just
he
one
walks over
sentence.
there.
First of all, I think that second Intifada, if you know the Fatah movement, there was a very big and substantial discussion inside the Fatah movement, and the conclusion was the second Intifada was a mistake, especially the violent part. And this is part of the reason why the Fatah is not involved in terror for a long, long time. So not every wave of violence will bring peace. Okay.
Well,
Sometimes.
right, but they're going to
One last question over
Okay,
here.
here we go. Last question.
I'll preface what I'm saying by saying I'm completely against the occupation, and I've read your book. Thank you. I'm teaching it to my students in a couple of weeks. But I'm a little dubious about all this talk about going back to 1948. And the implication seems to be that there's a kind of moral purity on the part of the Palestinians in terms of 1948. You know this history much better than I do, I'm sure, but the day after the partition resolution in 1947 was the first Palestinian attack, 1948, the invasion of 5 Arab countries, with this stated claim, the Arab League said to the world, this will be a war of extermination, and they lost. So and by saying this, I'm not saying that they deserve what's happened since. That is not the implication. But I am saying that what happened in 1948 is pretty complicated. I do not see the Palestinians as morally pure, or the Arab countries as morally pure in 1948 by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm a little dubious about the fact that sort of somehow going back to 1948 will help to bring us forward into whatever 2020 and any sort of solution. It seems to me that what might well happen is a kind of rehashing or a dredging up of both sides having much to account for.
Okay.
But I don't see the fact that the
I have to
Palestinian...
say, this is really important for me to say, because I had an argument with Udi about it today. For me, conversation about the Nakba is also an honest conversation with the Palestinians about their mistakes. If someone tells me the Palestinian should not have accepted a partition, I find it ridiculous. Also understanding the consequences, I find it more appropriate, and I find it also patronizing on the Palestinians. So when I talk about an honest discussion about the Nakba in 48, it's from all sides. But to be honest about it, the way Israel expelled Palestinians wasn't always part of the war. It was a different plan. But I just want to say something that I think where maybe you are locked. The only thing that I'm saying that let's try to find solution to the whole range of the conflict. Maybe we should start also in some place that we didn't thought it's possible to start before. Because of 67 became so complicated with the settlers, and as Ethan said, they will not be removed of them. Let's start to think about new solution. Think about how many people of here that care about Israel and read about Israel know about the initiative 2 states, 1 homeland. The fact that you don't know enough about it, it's part of the problem, because this is the most important grassroots movement that I met in the last years. It's Palestinian and Jews that together sat for 3 years and came with a solution. So I think that we should also start like embracing and thinking about new ideas. I think 2 state, 1 homeland is an ingenious idea of solving the conflict, because it has all the parameters under account.
So that was a great conversation with all of you guys and with both of you. Thank you very, very much.